My son, Thomas, in his impeccably tailored suit that I paid for, stood before the board of Wentworth Properties, the company I built from the ground up, and uttered the words that would shatter my world. "You're senile, Mother," he said, his voice dripping with a feigned concern that was more insulting than outright malice. He forgot whose name I registered this company under. The silence in the boardroom was a suffocating blanket, thick with the unspoken thoughts of men and women who had known me for decades, who had witnessed my sharp mind and unwavering dedication. They now looked at me with a mixture of pity and discomfort, their gazes shifting away as if my sudden senility were a contagious disease. In that moment, a cold, hard knot formed in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't just the public humiliation, the betrayal of my own flesh and blood, that cut so deep. It was the chilling realization that this was not a spontaneous act of cruelty, but a meticulously planned execution. The whispers I had dismissed as paranoia, the subtle shifts in behavior I had attributed to stress, the sudden concern for my health, it all clicked into place, forming a picture of a conspiracy that had been brewing right under my nose. I looked at my son, truly looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't see the boy I had raised, the child I had nurtured and loved. I saw a stranger, a predator with my son's eyes, a man who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted, and what he wanted was everything I had. The irony was almost laughable. Senile? Me? The woman who had single-handedly navigated the treacherous waters of the real estate world for over 50 years? Who had built an empire from a single, audacious investment? The woman who could still recite the legal description of every property we owned? Who could spot a flaw in a contract from a mile away? I may have been 78 years old. My hands may have been gnarled with arthritis, but my mind was as sharp as a shard of glass. And in that moment of profound betrayal, that shard of glass was honed into a weapon. They thought I was a doddering old fool, a relic to be discarded. They were about to learn that this old woman still had a few tricks up her sleeve, and the first trick was a secret I had held close to my chest for over half a century, a secret that was about to unravel their carefully constructed web of lies and deceit. They had forgotten who held the real power in the Wentworth family, and I was about to remind them in a way they would never forget. My story does not begin in that sterile boardroom, under the flickering fluorescent lights of my own personal Gethsemane. It begins decades earlier, in a world that seems a lifetime away. It begins with a young woman, a dreamer with a fire in her belly and a head for numbers, a woman who dared to believe she could build something that would last. I was that woman. Agnes Wentworth. And this is the story of how I built an empire and how I almost lost it all to the one person I thought I could trust with my life. I met my husband, Richard, in the optimistic haze of the post-war era. He was a good man, a kind man, with a gentle soul and a smile that could melt the coldest of hearts. He was a dreamer, an architect with a vision for creating beautiful spaces for people to live and work. I, on the other hand, was the pragmatist. I saw the beauty in his designs, but I also saw the potential for profit. I saw the land, the raw, untamed earth, and I saw the cities that would one day rise from it. Together, we were a formidable team. He designed the buildings, and I found the land, secured the financing, and navigated the labyrinthine world of zoning laws and building permits. We were partners in every sense of the word, building not just a business, but a life together. We were blessed with 2 sons, Thomas and Marcus. From the moment they were born, they were the center of my universe. Thomas, my eldest, was a force of nature from the very beginning. He was ambitious, driven, and had a charisma that could charm the birds from the trees. He was a natural leader, and I saw in him the future of Wentworth Properties. Marcus, my younger son, was a different soul altogether. He was quieter, more introspective, with a gentle nature that mirrored his father's. He had a creative spirit, a love for art and music, and a kind heart that was often overshadowed by his brother's boisterous personality. As the years passed, Wentworth Properties grew beyond our wildest dreams. We were no longer a small, local firm, but a major player in the regional real estate market. We built skyscrapers that touched the clouds, sprawling suburban communities, and chic urban lofts. We weathered economic downturns and market fluctuations, always emerging stronger and more resilient. I was the driving force behind it all, the one who made the tough decisions, the one who took the risks. Richard was my rock, my confidant, my biggest cheerleader. He was the heart of our family, the glue that held us all together. Then, the unthinkable happened. Richard was diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form of cancer. The news was a physical blow, a punch to the gut that knocked the wind out of me. The man who had been my constant companion for over 40 years, the love of my life, was fading before my eyes. We fought it with everything we had, with the best doctors and the latest treatments, but it was a battle we were destined to lose. The day he died, a part of me died with him. The world, once so vibrant and full of promise, was now a dull, gray landscape of grief. In the depths of my sorrow, I made a decision that would have far-reaching consequences. I decided to step back from the day-to-day operations of the company and hand the reins over to Thomas. He was, after all, the one I had been grooming to take my place. He had the ambition, the drive, the ruthlessness that I knew was necessary to succeed in this business. Marcus had no interest in the corporate world, and I didn't want to force him into a life that would make him unhappy. So I made Thomas the CEO of Wentworth Properties, believing that he would carry on his father's legacy and mine, that he would continue to build the empire we had created together. I was wrong, so very, very wrong. At first, the transition was seamless. Thomas was a natural in the role of CEO, and the company continued to prosper under his leadership. I remained on the board, a silent partner, a figurehead, content to watch from the sidelines as my son took the company to new heights. I retreated into the quiet solitude of my home, finding solace in my garden, my books, and my memories of Richard. I baked cookies for my grandchildren, hosted holiday dinners, and played the role of the benevolent matriarch. I was so lost in my grief, so consumed by my own sorrow, that I failed to see the subtle changes in Thomas, the warning signs that something was amiss. The first inkling of trouble came in the form of a hushed phone call from Marcus. He was a minority shareholder in the company, a silent partner with a small but significant stake. He had been effectively sidelined by Thomas, pushed out of the inner circle, his opinions and concerns dismissed as irrelevant. He told me that Thomas was making reckless decisions, that he was selling off valuable assets to fund a lavish lifestyle for himself and his wife, Elizabeth. He spoke of secret meetings, of backroom deals, of a plan to take the company in a new and dangerous direction. I didn't want to believe him. I couldn't believe him. This was my son, the boy I had raised, the child I had loved. He would never betray me. He would never do anything to harm the company we had built together. I dismissed Marcus's concerns as sibling rivalry, as the jealousy of a younger brother overshadowed by his more successful older sibling. I told him he was being paranoid, that he was imagining things. I told him to trust his brother, to have faith in the man I had chosen to lead our company. I was a fool, A blind, naive fool. The truth began to unravel, piece by painful piece. I started paying closer attention, listening to the whispers in the hallways, reading between the lines of the quarterly reports. I saw the extravagant trips, the designer clothes, the new sports cars. I saw the way Elizabeth, a woman whose ambition was matched only by her avarice, preened and postured, flaunting her newfound wealth like a trophy. I saw the fear in the eyes of the longtime employees, the ones who had been with us from the beginning, the ones who were being replaced by a new generation of sycophants and yes-men. The final straw came when I discovered that Thomas was planning to sell off the Wentworth building, the crown jewel of our portfolio, the building that Richard had designed, the building that was a testament to his genius, his legacy. He was planning to sell it to a foreign conglomerate, a company known for its ruthless business practices and its disregard for architectural preservation. They were going to gut the building, strip it of its historic character, and turn it into another soulless glass and steel monstrosity. He was going to erase his father's memory for a quick and easy profit. That was when the fog of grief finally lifted, replaced by a cold, hard rage. The love I had for my son was replaced by a sense of betrayal so profound it threatened to consume me. I had given him everything, my trust, my company, my legacy, and he had taken it all and spat it back in my face. He had not only betrayed me, but he had betrayed his father's memory, and that was a sin I could not forgive. I knew then that I had to act. I had to fight back. Not just for myself, but for Richard, for Marcus, for the loyal employees who had dedicated their lives to Wentworth Properties. I had to reclaim what was rightfully mine. But how? Thomas had the board in his pocket, the shareholders in his thrall. He had the power, the influence, the resources to crush me. I was just an old woman, a relic from a bygone era. Or so he thought. But I had a secret. A weapon that had been lying dormant for over 50 years. A weapon that Thomas knew nothing about. A weapon that was about to turn the tables in a way he could never have imagined. The seed of the idea had been planted long ago, in the early days of Wentworth Properties. Richard and I were young, ambitious, and deeply in love. We were also acutely aware of the precariousness of life, the fragility of our dreams. We had seen other family businesses torn apart by greed and infighting, by the next generation's sense of entitlement. We were determined that would not happen to us. We wanted to build something that would last, a legacy that would endure for generations to come. It was Richard who came up with the idea. He had a friend, a brilliant but eccentric lawyer named Alistair Finch, who specialized in an obscure area of trust and estate law. Alistair was a master of the long game, a man who thought in terms of decades, not years. He proposed a plan that was as audacious as it was ingenious. He suggested we create a sleeping trust, a legal entity that would exist in a state of suspended animation, waiting for a specific set of circumstances to awaken it. The trust would be the true owner of our most valuable assets, the Wentworth Properties trademark, the patents on Richard's innovative architectural designs, and the deeds to a handful of key properties, the ones that formed the foundation of our empire. The trust would be a silent, invisible partner, its existence known only to us and Alistair. The beneficiary of the trust would not be our children, but a charitable foundation dedicated to the preservation of architectural heritage, a cause that was dear to Richard's heart. The trust had a single, specific trigger, a hostile takeover attempt, or any action that threatened the long-term viability and integrity of Wentworth Properties. If that trigger was pulled, the trust would awaken, and its assets would be transferred to the foundation. effectively stripping the company of its most valuable holdings, leaving it a hollowed-out shell. It was our doomsday device, our nuclear option, a way to ensure that our legacy would never be destroyed by greed or incompetence. For 50 years, the trust had slept, a silent guardian watching over our empire. I had almost forgotten it existed. A relic of a bygone era, a testament to a youthful paranoia that had long since faded. But now, in the face of Thomas's betrayal, I remembered, and I knew that the time had come to awaken the sleeping giant. I contacted Alistair, now a frail but still sharp-witted man in his 90s. He remembered the trust, of course. He had been the one who had drafted the documents, who had woven the intricate legal web that would now be my salvation. He was a man who reveled in the delicious irony of it all, the son attempting to usurp the mother, only to be undone by a legal maneuver his own father had put in place half a century earlier. We worked in secret, Alistair and I, poring over the ancient documents, preparing the legal strategy that would bring about Thomas's downfall. It was a complex and delicate operation, requiring a level of precision and cunning that I hadn't exercised in years. But as I delved back into the world of contracts and legal jargon, I felt a familiar thrill, a surge of adrenaline that reminded me of the young woman I had once been, the woman who had built an empire from scratch. I was no longer a grieving widow, a doddering old fool. I was a warrior, a queen preparing to reclaim her throne. The day of the annual shareholder meeting arrived, a day that Thomas had intended to be his coronation, the day he would finally be free of his mother's shadow. He had no idea it was to be his day of reckoning. I walked into the boardroom with my head held high, my heart pounding in my chest. I sat at the head of the table, in the chair that had been mine for 50 years, and I looked at my son, my betrayer. He smiled at me, a condescending, patronizing smile that made my blood boil. "Mother," he said, his voice oozing with false sincerity, "I'm so glad you could make it. I know it's been difficult for you lately." The meeting began, a tedious procession of financial reports and corporate jargon. I listened in silence, my face an impassive mask, giving no hint of the storm that was about to break. Then came the moment I had been waiting for, the moment that Thomas had so eagerly anticipated. He stood up, cleared his throat, and launched into his carefully rehearsed speech. He spoke of my declining health, my failing memory, my inability to make rational decisions. He painted a picture of a senile old woman, a liability to the company, a danger to its future. He produced a report from a doctor, a man I had never met, a man who had been paid to declare me incompetent. He called for a vote of no confidence, a motion to strip me of my voting rights, to remove me from the board of the company I had founded. The room was silent, the air thick with tension. I looked at the faces around the table, the men and women who had been my colleagues, my friends. I saw pity. I saw discomfort. I saw a few brave souls who met my gaze with a look of sympathy and regret. But no one spoke up. No one defended me. They were all in Thomas's pocket, bought and paid for with promises of power and profit. Then, just as the chairman was about to call for a vote, the doors to the boardroom swung open, and Alistair Finch walked in, followed by a team of lawyers, their arms laden with boxes of documents. Alistair, despite his age, had a commanding presence, a theatrical flair that he had cultivated over a long and storied career. He strode to the head of the table, placed a single leather-bound document in front of me, and then turned to face the stunned and silent board. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice ringing with authority, "I am Alistair Finch, and I represent the true owner of Wentworth Properties." A murmur of confusion rippled through the room. Thomas, his face a mask of disbelief, stammered, "What is the meaning of this? Who is this man?" "I am the man who is about to unravel your pathetic little coup," Alistair said, his eyes twinkling with a mischievous glee. He then proceeded to explain the existence of the Sleeping Trust, the legal entity that held the true ownership of the company's most valuable assets. He explained that the trust had been activated by Thomas's own actions, his attempt to seize control of the company, his blatant disregard for the legacy of his father. He produced the original trust documents, the deeds to the properties, the patents for the architectural designs, the trademark registration for the Wentworth Properties name. He showed them the incontrovertible proof that Thomas, for all his bluster and bravado, was nothing more than a tenant in a house that belonged to someone else, and that someone else was the charitable foundation that Richard and I had established so many years ago. The color drained from Thomas's face. He stared at the documents, his mouth agape, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and horror. He looked at me, a dawning realization in his eyes, the look of a man who has just seen his entire world crumble before him. But I wasn't finished. I had one more card to play. I stood up, my voice clear and steady, and I addressed the board. "For 50 years, I said, I have dedicated my life to this company. I have built it from the ground up, with my own 2 hands, with the love and support of my husband. I have made sacrifices you can only imagine, and I will not stand by and watch it be destroyed by the greed and arrogance of my own son." I then announced my intention to dissolve the current board and appoint a new one, a board that would be dedicated to preserving the legacy of Wentworth Properties, a board that would be led by my son, Marcus. The room erupted in chaos. Thomas, his face contorted with rage, lunged at me, screaming obscenities, his carefully constructed facade of a loving son completely shattered. He was restrained by security, dragged from the room, a raving, pathetic figure of a man who had lost everything. Elizabeth, her face a mask of cold, hard fury, followed him, her dreams of a life of luxury and leisure turning to dust before her eyes. In the end, it was not the legal documents, not the brilliant maneuvering of Alistair Finch that won me the day. It was the truth of who I was, of what I had built, of the love and dedication that had been the foundation of Wentworth Properties from the very beginning. In the aftermath of the shareholder meeting, the dust began to settle. The story of the senile old woman who had outsmarted her greedy son became the stuff of legend in the business world, a cautionary tale for any who would underestimate the power of a woman who has nothing left to lose. Marcus, with his quiet strength and his unwavering integrity, proved to be a natural leader. He had his father's vision and my business acumen, a combination that made him the perfect person to lead Wentworth Properties into the future. He brought back the old-timers, the loyal employees who had been cast aside by Thomas, and together they began to rebuild the company, not in the image of my son's greed, but in the image of his father's dream. As for Thomas and Elizabeth, they were left with nothing. The company was a hollow shell, stripped of its most valuable assets. They were saddled with a mountain of debt, the result of their extravagant spending and reckless investments. They were social outcasts, their names synonymous with greed and betrayal. They had lost everything, not just their wealth, but their family, their reputation, their self-respect. I never saw Thomas again. I heard that he and Elizabeth divorced, that he moved to some tropical island, a broken man living in self-imposed exile. I sometimes wonder if he ever feels any remorse, any regret for what he did. But I know in my heart that he does not. He is, and always will be, a man consumed by his own ego, his own insatiable greed. I, on the other hand, found a peace that I had not known since Richard's death. I had reclaimed my company, my legacy, my life. I had proven to myself and to the world that I was not a senile old woman, but a force to be reckoned with. I had found a renewed sense of purpose, a reason to get up in the morning. I had found joy in working alongside Marcus, in watching him grow into the leader I had always known he could be. But my greatest joy came from my grandchildren. I spent my days baking cookies with them, telling them stories about their grandfather, teaching them the values of hard work, honesty, and family. I wanted them to know the true story of Wentworth Properties, not the one that would be written in the business journals, but the one that was written in the hearts of the people who had built it. I learned a valuable lesson in all of this. I learned that family is not always about blood. It is about love, trust, and loyalty. It is about the people who stand by you, who believe in you, who lift you up when you are at your lowest. And I learned that true strength is not about power or wealth, but about the courage to fight for what you believe in, to stand up for what is right, even when the odds are stacked against you. I am an old woman now, and my time on this earth is drawing to a close. But I am not afraid. I have lived a full and rich life, a life of love, loss, and triumph. I have built an empire, and I have saved it from destruction. I have raised 2 sons, one who broke my heart and one who healed it. I have left a legacy that will endure for generations to come, and I have done it all on my own terms. I am Agnes Wentworth, and this is my story.